Greetings, this is Doc Ock coming at you live and direct from Blakfacts headquarters central today with another presentation from the Blakfacts archives, the Crosby archives, absolutely. Coming at you live and direct today on this first day after the House and the Senate have voted on Juneteenth becoming the next national holiday. So we now are in a whole new era where we have 12 national holidays, including Juneteenth. So this is indeed a momentous day. I can't say it was something I was actually working for. I kind of liked it the way that it was, but nevertheless, as people like to say today, it is what it is, and as I like to say, it ain't what it ain't. So we've been celebrating Juneteenth all month anyway, and we're just going to go ahead and continue with our stellar Juneteenth celebration here on the Blakfacts network, Tubular Blakfacts, or on the Blakfacts channel, I should say. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and get this party started. You know what you need to do. Number one, go ahead and give us a like if you're watching on Facebook. Give us a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. And last but not least, go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Meanwhile, let's go ahead and read our proverb of the day. Let's see what we come up with today. What interesting little nugget of wisdom that we can drop on you, that you can take with you, that is even better than gold, because it'll last all the way until the days when you're really old. Whereas it's hard to say about the gold, because that, you know, anything can happen with your gold. All right, so here we go here. All right, good one for today. There is no phrase without a double meaning. There is no phrase without a double meaning. Now think about that one. There's a heavy nugget of wisdom for you right there. There is no phrase without a double meaning, and that is a proverb from Kenya, Kenyan proverb. Meanwhile, we're going to continue to read from our little tome here, the narrative of Sojourner Truth that we've been reading from all of this week, and pick up where we left off. We just finished with reading about about Sojourner Truth's religious instruction. Now, I'm sure that was not all she learned about religion, but it's one of her fondest memories, apparently, because she brought it back up again, and it came directly from interaction with her mama Bett. So meanwhile, let's go ahead and move on with and groove on and continue to celebrate Juneteenth right here on the Tubular Blakfacts channel. All right. By the way, for those of you who are new to what we do here at Tubular Blakfacts, if you are watching us on Facebook, you are not seeing all of the images that we're projecting up on the screen. That's because I don't have a way to do that at this point, so I would if I could. So if you would, go ahead and switch from Facebook to YouTube, view us in YouTube, and then you'll be able to see, you'll be able to get the full Molly, so to speak. Okay, because there you'll see all of the fly images that we're putting up here on the screen. All right, meanwhile, You know, life is all about transitions. We transition from one phase to the next. We transition from childhood into adulthood. And so at this time, we're going to talk about the transition of Mama Bett, Sojourner Truth's mother. So she relates it to us by starting off one morning in early autumn. From the reason above mentioned, we cannot tell what year. In other words, Sojourner hadn't really got her coordinates together yet to be able to know what day, year, month, etc. that it was. But she says one morning in early autumn, Mama Bett told James she would make him a loaf of rye bread and get Mrs. Simmons, their kind neighbor, to bake it for them, as she would bake that forenoon. James told her he had engaged to rake after the cart for his neighbors that morning, but before he commenced, he would pole off some apples from a tree nearby, which they were allowed to gather, and if she could get some of them baked with the bread, it would give it a nice relish for their dinner. He beat off the apples and soon after saw Mama Bett come out and gather them up. At the blowing of the horn for dinner, he groped his way into his cellar, anticipating his humble but warm and nourishing meal. Okay, blowing of the horn for dinner, he had to grope his way into his cellar. That's where they were living at. Apparently, there was no lighting in the cellar. So he was anticipating his humble but warm and nourishing meal when, lo, instead of being cheered by the sight and odor of fresh baked bread and the savory apples, his cellar seemed more cheerless than usual. And at first, neither sight nor sound met eye or ear, but on groping his way through the room, his staff, which he used as a pioneer to go before and warn him of danger. Or maybe this is because he was blind. Maybe he was blind at this time. Maybe that's what the problem is. I'm not sure. They didn't talk about that as being one of his ailments. Seemed to be impeded in its progress, and a low gurgling, choking sound proceeded from the object before him, giving him the first intimation of the truth as it was, that Mama Bett, his bosom companion, the only remaining member of his large family, had fallen in a fit of the palsy and lay helpless and senseless on the earth. Who among us, located in pleasant homes, surrounded with every comfort and so many kind and sympathizing friends, can picture to ourselves the dark and desolate state of poor old James, penniless, weak, lame, and nearly blind as he was at the moment he found his companion was removed from him, and he was left alone in the world with no one to aid, comfort, or console him. For she never revived again and lived only a few hours after being discovered senseless by her poor, bereaved James. Now that's a sad story. There ain't no doubt about that. That is a very sad story. The last days of Bomefree, Isabella and Peter were permitted to see the remains of their mother laid in their last narrow dwelling, and to make their bereaved father a little visit here. They returned to their servitude, and most piteous were the lamentations of the poor old man when at last they also were obliged to bid him farewell. Juan Fernandez on his desolate island was not so pitiable an object as this poor lame man. Blind and crippled, he was too superannuated to think for a moment of taking care of himself, and he greatly feared no person would interest themselves in his behalf. Oh, he would exclaim, I had thought God would take me first. Mama was so much smarter than I and could get about and take care of herself, and I am so old and so helpless. What is to become of me? I can't do anything more. My children are all gone, and here I am left helpless and alone. And then, as I was taking leave of him, said his daughter, in relating it, he raised his voice and cried aloud like a child. Oh, how he did cry. It's pitiful. I hear it now and remember it as well as if it were but yesterday. Poor old man, he thought God had done it all, and my heart bled within me at the sight of his misery. Excuse me. Just plug this up real quick here. There we go. His heart bled at, no, my heart bled at the sight of his misery. How'd she say it? Yes, my heart bled within me at the sight of his misery. He begged me to get permission to come and see him sometimes, which I readily and heartily promised him. But when all had left him, the Ardenbergs, having some feeling left for their faithful and favorite slave, took turns about in keeping him, permitting him to stay a few weeks at one house and then a while at another, and so around. If when he made a removal, the place where he was going was not too far off, he took up his line of march, staff in hand, and asked for no assistance. If it was 12 or 20 miles, they gave him a ride. While he's living in this way, Isabella was twice permitted to visit him. Another time, she walked 12 miles and carried her infant in her arms to see him. He had just left for a place some 20 miles distant, and she never saw him more. The last time she did see him, she found him seated on a rock by the roadside, alone and far from any house. He was then migrating from the house of one Ardenberg to that of another, several miles distant. His hair was white like wool. He was almost blind, and his gait was more a creep than a walk. But the weather was warm and pleasant, and he did not dislike the journey. When Isabella addressed him, he recognized her voice and was exceeding glad to see her. He was assisted to mount the wagon, was carried back to the famous cellar of which we have spoken, and there they held their last earthly conversation. He again, as usual, bewailed his loneliness, spoke in tones of anguish of his many children, saying, they are all taken away from me. I have now not one to give me a cup of cold water. Why should I live and not die? Isabella, whose heart yearned over her father, and who would have made any sacrifice to have been able to be with him and take care of him, tried to comfort him by that she had heard the white folks say that all the slaves in the South would be freed in 10 years. and that then she would come and take care of him. I would take just as good care of you as Mama would if she was here, continued Isabel. Oh, my child, replied he, I cannot live that long. Oh, do, Daddy, do live, and I will take such good care of you, was her rejoinder. She now says, why, I thought then in my ignorance that he could live if he would. I just as much thought so as I ever thought anything in my life, and I insisted on his living, but he shook his head and insisted he wasn't going to make it. But before Bomefree's good constitution would yield either to age, exposure, or a strong desire to die, the Ardenbergs again tired of him and offered freedom to two old slaves, Caesar, brother of Mama Bett, and his wife Betsy, on condition that they should take care of James. I was about to say their brother-in-law, but as slaves are neither husbands nor wives in law, the idea of there being brothers-in-law is truly ludicrous. Note from Sojourner Truth. And although they were too old and infirm to take care of themselves, Caesar, having been afflicted for a long time with fever sores, and his wife with the jaundice, they eagerly accepted the boon of freedom, which had been the lifelong desire of their souls, though at a time when emancipation was to them little more than destitution, and was a freedom more to be desired by the master than the slave. Sojourner declares of the slaves in their ignorance that their thoughts are no longer than her finger. Their thoughts are no longer than her finger. And that's the end of our presentation for today. Now that is I know I've read Sojourner Truth's narrative before, but I read a much shorter version. I'm not sure why this longer version exists. I'm not sure if she wrote it twice, or I'm not sure what the history is on that, but I certainly don't remember reading anything before that piteous as this old man who had lived in a cellar for his entire life, now lame, blind, crippled, and having to walk back and forth between residences on a regular basis, not knowing where he was going to be going to next, basically homeless. And then his brother and his brother's mate being released from their bondage into what can only be termed as absolute destitution. And if you don't know what that word means, please look up the word destitute, because that's basically, that's homeless. That's what that is. If you want to substitute a word for destitute, that's straight up homeless. Out and out, you out there on, you know what I mean. You out there on your derriere trying to make it from day to day, moment to moment, and you saddled with this lame, blind, crippled man who can't do anything but impede whatever little bit of motion that you might have left, because he cannot take care of himself. That was a sad story. So on this first eve of Juneteenth, because Juneteenth is around the corner. Juneteenth is going to be Saturday, June 19th. Okay, so it's just around the corner. On this first eve of a government, a federally recognized Juneteenth, these are the kind of stories that we are remembering. That what is it that Juneteenth did? Juneteenth changed our lives forever in some ways that were good, absolutely, but for some was not so good. So, you know, you can say, what's the word? How's that term go? Emancipation was a blessing and a curse. If you were young in your youth, emancipation could be a boon. But if you were old and crippled and blind like Bomefree, then emancipation was definitely a curse, because you were just turned out to pasture like an old horse. Just turned out to pasture to just go and die somewhere out on the prairie, far away from the people, so they wouldn't have to smell your remains. That's pitiful. And that's what Juneteenth amounts to. This is what Juneteenth amounts to. It's a celebration of this kind, this emancipation that for some was a blessing, but also could be a curse. Because as our proverb said, there is no phrase that does not have a double meaning. That's where we started. That's where we're going to end today. So remember that this is Doc Ock at noon and 9. So you know what time it is, and you know what time we will return. We will be black tonight at 9 p.m. Be here then when we continue to tell the story of Stagecoach Mary Fields. Okay, be here then, and we'll continue telling her story through the recollections of movie star Gary Cooper. Movie star and former cowboy, the late Gary Cooper, tells his recollections of Stagecoach Mary Fields tonight, right here on the Tubular Blakfacts channel. In the meanwhile, don't forget to give us a like. If you're looking on Facebook, if you're on the tube, give us a thumbs up. And then go ahead and subscribe to the Tubular Blakfacts channel. Peace out, without a doubt. Of course, with justice, because anything less disgusts us. We love to be discussed, but we do not like being disgusted. Peace out, y'all.